It might help if I turned on my microphone. Hello there. Welcome to another edition of the Inris Files. Thoughts on culture, history, and the human condition from a very Generation X point of view. I think what I'm about to say is true of every point in human history, but more so now, and it'll be even more true tomorrow or the day after. And that is, we are living in a period of history where the rules are being rewritten even as we're trying to master the rules that are already obsolete. This presents itself in a lot of ways. Something that I was told when I was in college is that 70% of the jobs that are waiting for us in the future don't even exist now. That when you graduate from college, it's a good bet that 10 years from the time you graduate, you're going to be doing something that is in no way related to directly to what you are studying in college. And so, the healthiest approach to take when going to college is to learn how to learn, not look at it as vocational training itself. Oh, I'm going to be a um, a computer programmer. The stuff you learn as in your computer science classes in college, those languages are going to be dead 5 years from now. In fact, with the advent of AI, those jobs are going to be very scarce. However, computer programming teaches you how to think logically, how to test your assumptions, and to proceed along the best route forward. It's about course correction, it's about closing loops, closing the parentheses, and writing things that balance out in the end. And once you've learned how one computer language works, it's a lot easier to learn the next one or the next one. And programming today is not like it was when I was in college or high school or during the decades that I was working in the industry. Even when I was working on software foundations that actually go back quite a while. But the fundamentals remain true, especially when it comes to you need to have a solid design and then you need to test your assumptions. You need to actually test the code in a working environment, uh, or in like a beta testing working environment before you release it out into the wild, where it's just going to get hammered on by lots and lots of users. Granted, some things that you learn in college are going to be very much vocational training. If you're pursuing a degree in medicine, if you're pursuing a degree in law, those are principles that you learn in college that you then carry with you to a very specific job. And yet, even then, I know so many people who went to college when I did, who were good friends of mine, who knew they wanted to be a doctor, who got their medical degrees, who went into the field and were doctors for a long time, and now they're not doctors anymore. For one reason or another, they've decided to switch careers. This is not an episode about what you should do when you're in college. This is an episode about, and I'm going to tell a couple of stories about how we approach things. If we approach them as learning opportunities and we frame them that way, it actually changes how effective they are at helping us move on to the next steps. I had the opportunity just a few days ago, just a few days before this recording, to participate in as a more as a spectator than a speaker, a public speaking contest. One of the speakers told a very personal story. And by the way, the thing about this public speaking contest is it was for people who mostly, English wasn't necessarily their first language. And so a lot of them were learning how to give speeches in English, which wasn't their native language. And so they actually were trying to both present a persuasive statement about who they were and do so in a way that made absolutely perfect sense to people whose native language is English. And this one woman whose native language was Polish gave this excellent talk about how, as she was growing up, she had the hardest time learning English. Her school taught English as a foreign language, and she just had the hardest time with it. And she finally embraced the idea that a couple of teachers of hers had said, "You're just not good at languages, and that's okay." But opportunity presented itself to her later on, where she was gonna be picking up somebody from the airport and bringing them to an event, and that person was a native English speaker who did not know Polish. So, the speaker here had to learn English, at least in some rudimentary fashion, by the time she was gonna be picking this person up at the airport. And she did it. She found a way to make it work the way her brain worked, as opposed to the way schools conventionally teach it, such that by the time she picked this person up, they were actually able to communicate effectively. I suspect the woman that she had picked up who was from Britain, it just on the basis of the story, I'm imagining, yeah, the woman probably slowed down her speech a little bit, made sure she was enunciating her words. Even so, it's amazing that she was able to maintain a conversation on the basis of just having a couple of months to prepare. And, uh, and the moral of the story for her was that even though she had been told, "You're no good at this, you can't do this," that she realized if she changed her approach, she might actually find a way to make it happen, and she did. And not only that, the woman she had picked up at the airport to bring to that event, they became lifelong friends to the point where they visited, in England at one point. And so it's it's a lesson that actually I had to learn as well. I had learned how to program in a language called Pascal when I was in high school. I never took any computer programming courses when I was in college, even though I had gone to college to study that. And I had jobs on campus where I was learning how to program, and I was learning how to program things like HTML, hypertext markup language, which essentially means websites. This was in its early days, and what I was learning how to do was to mark up a Russian text so that somebody who didn't recognize a word in the story that they were reading, they could just click on it with their mouse and it would come up with the English translation. So it was neat. HTML is hardly a complicated language. And then later on, when I learned CSS, cascading style sheets, which is it's a language that's parked on top of HTML to do even more fancy formatting. I'm not trying to say that these things were super complicated or anything, but I was able at that time to pick up completely new languages as I was going. Of course, I was doing this for the foreign language department because I was studying Russian when I was in college. And then after grad school, I ended up deciding that I was going to work in the computer industry. I didn't have a degree in computer science, but I could demonstrate that I understood how to code. So then I ended up learning how to build databases for this particular company and so on and so forth. I reached a point where I felt like I just really couldn't learn another programming language. The industry was changing so fast, there was no way for me to keep up with it. I had moved into a position at Microsoft, they call it program management, where really you're more responsible for designing the software, but you're not coding, you're not necessarily testing. You're just saying, this is how it should look and this is what it should do. And then I left Microsoft and I ended up working some other jobs. I ended up running a company for a little while. The company ran into some hard times, and I told this story earlier in a previous live stream about how I just let people know I'm a smart guy. I'm looking for work, and if you know anybody who's looking to hire somebody who can solve problems, I'm available. Ended up saying it to the right guy who went ahead and hired me. And then, and this was a fascinating test that I'd been put to. This was the interview process. He said, "Okay, I'm going to send you a laptop. I'm going to send you two disks with software on them. One has an old version of the software, the other has a new version of the software. I want you to install those two versions of the software. I'm going to email you a file. The file works with the old version of the software, and I want you to upgrade that file so that it works with the new version of the software. And after you've done that, can you find a way to speed up how that file works?" I thought it was awfully trusting of him to send me a laptop, but it was essentially this was the job interview. If I could do the job, I had the job. If I couldn't do the job, I had to ship back the laptop. So he shipped me the laptop, he shipped me the software, and then he emailed me the file. I installed the software. Everything is fine. I figure out from reading the README notes, oh, this is how the software is supposed to work. This is what it's supposed to do with the file. I go to load the file into the old version of the software, and it doesn't load. Doesn't load at all. I cannot get it to load. And I'm stymied. He told me to load this file into this software, and it's not loading. And do I call him and say there's a problem, or is the test here to see if I'll figure out what the problem is? So I decided before calling him, I would actually try to see if I could figure out what the problem was. I knew of some software that was available that would let me look at the raw data within that file. I have no idea what the data means. It is obviously some different kind of a markup language, so I could kind of suss out sort of how it worked a little bit. But then I got to a point where something just didn't look like all the rest. There was line after line after line after line after code, and then one line where it didn't go all the way to the end. There was a carriage return and then a couple spaces, and then that line continued on down. This didn't look like all of the rest, and so I went ahead and I removed the carriage returns and made that line look like all of the rest, and then I tried to read it into the old software, and it worked just fine. Then I was able to convert it up to the new version of the software just fine. Everything, I was following the instructions, no problem. And then I tried to speed up how that file was being processed. And this is software I'd never used before. And I tried everything I could think of. It's just a series of, well, logically, if this loop is running slowly, maybe what we do is we break out the parts into separate serial, run these loops in parallel instead of serial, or this and that and the other. And I tried everything I could think of. Wasn't able to get it to go faster. And then I did searches on the internet. Keep in mind, the internet was a little more rudimentary then than it is now. All of the thing, and people had searched for what I had searched for. How do I speed up processing in this software version, this version? People had looked for that. The answers that had been proposed, I had already tried. So then came the day, a couple days later, when I had an appointment to talk with the fellow who had sent me the laptop, and he asked me what I had done, and I told him the whole bit, installed everything just great, and then couldn't read the old file, and I wasn't sure if that was part of the test or not. So here's how I solved it. And he stopped me after I was done, and he said, after I'd explained how I had gotten past that step, and he had said, "Okay, how long did you spend on that?" I'm like, "Well, it took me a couple of hours to kind of figure it out, to get the software installed that would let me look at the raw version of the file and all that." He said, "Okay, well, we use the 15-minute rule here. If it takes you more than 15 minutes to solve the problem, ask somebody. Somebody else has seen this problem. They know how to solve it. We get paid by the hour. We can't afford wasting our time on problems that defy explanation. So you did great, but next time, if it takes you longer than 15 minutes to solve the problem, ask somebody." All right. This actually was very reassuring to know about this particular company, that their work ethic wasn't everybody had to do their own thing and be isolated and siloed and all the rest of that. I had previously worked at software companies where you could only advance if other people on your team didn't advance, and that fostered a culture of essentially sabotaging your coworkers. Not a healthy environment. This one was a culture of you help your coworkers, because the better everybody is doing, the better everybody is doing. When the company makes its numbers, everybody gets a bigger bonus, that kind of thing. So, all right, a cooperative environment. Love it. Uh, but the thing is, and I didn't tell this part of the story when I had told the story about how I had actually even convinced him to consider me to work for his company. When he had said, "Okay, let's go ahead and do the interview process," I was actually kind of sweating bullets, because I'm like, I've been out of the computer industry now for a few years. I'd been running my own business, and the business I had been running had nothing to do with computer programming or software. I mean, we used computer software, but we were not selling software. And I figured I was too old, I was too washed up, I was too spent. It was going to be too difficult, which is why I wasn't looking for work in computers. But when the guy had asked me, when I had said, "Well, I'm a smart guy, I can solve problems," and he asked me, "Well, give me some examples of some problems you have solved." I talked to him about solving problems as a small business owner. I talked to him about solving a database problem I had once solved. Oh, it turns out this company is a database company. He also said that he was impressed with the fact that I had to solve problems for a small business because this consulting agency was a small business. So for me to have solved this problem using software I had never experienced before, using nothing but my own wits, right? Staying calm, staying centered, and saying there has to be a logical way to figure this out. The problem's either with the software, it's with the file. What can I find out about the file since the software seemed to install just fine? It's the same approach that you would take to solving any number of problems, whether it has to do with software or building a wall, or raising kids. If what you're doing isn't working, try something else. Figure out what the variables are and change one variable at a time until you figure out which is the variable that needed to be addressed. I realize I'm describing this in computer programmer terms, but you know what I mean applies to whatever field. But I had gone into this feeling like I'm too old, I'm too washed up. There's no way I'm going to be able to learn another computer programming language. And yet I needed a job. I really, really needed a job. This job came in just in the nick of time because we were running out of money. When I say we, I mean my wife and I. And when I was able to solve this problem and I got the job, I had this huge sense of relief because, all right, I actually managed to get a high tech job, even though I thought I was done. And then found out, okay, congratulations, you solved the problem, and here's how much we offer. And I'm like, yep, sounds great. Um, you know what? I'm going to be at a client's in Chicago. Now, by the way, he was based in California and I was based in Seattle, Washington. And when I say California, I mean Southern California. I have a client I have to go to in Chicago. Why don't you meet me there? Now, I'm glad this company, I could just make the arrangements for the flights. They were going to reimburse me right away. I was going to get a corporate, a company card so that I wasn't going to have to assume a lot of debt. But I was going to meet him at the client, and this was the first time I was going to meet him in person. Up until this point, we had only done our work over the phone and online, and it was for a newsletter for an alumni thing. And it was if you haven't heard the story, I was proposing this outrageous idea for the newsletter. So all he knew was my sense of humor and that I appeared to be good at solving problems. He said, "All right, I'm going to meet you in Chicago. I hope you have a suit. And if you don't, get a suit because we're going to see you in Chicago in 2 weeks. And um, we're going to be probably doing some work in SQL, and which is a computer language for databases. And you're going to have to learn 4GL. Don't worry about it. We'll teach you when you get there." 4GL was another database related computer programming language, which is not really in use much anymore at all. It's also not particularly difficult. But I say that now, having the experience in hindsight. But after that sense of relief that I had felt, now I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to learn another computer programming language. I'm going to have to be able to program in SQL. And I've told them I know how to handle databases, but I've never used SQL before. So here I am all worried about it again. I went to the local bookstore. I have no idea if you're watching this as I recorded in 2026 or if you're watching it at some point in the future. Bookstores are buildings that you used to walk to buy bound volumes of printed pages. I realize you know what a bookstore is, but I went to one of the local bookstores. The chain is long since out of business, and went to the section for how to learn computer computer programming languages. These were a series of books like Teach Yourself Unix in a Week, Teach Yourself Perl in 5 days. I kid you not. I found a very slim volume and it said, Teach Yourself SQL. SQL, by the way, is spelled SQL. It stands for Structured Query Language. Don't worry, there won't be a test on this at the end of the call, but at the end of the video. But I found a book, Learn SQL in 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, that sounds about my speed. So I bought this volume and I brought it with me on the plane. Now, it turns out it takes longer than 10 minutes to learn SQL. But I think when they said learn it in 10 minutes, they meant learn it in 10-minute chunks, learn it in 10 minutes per chapter. I don't know, there were maybe 8 or 10 chapters in there, and it really only went over the basics. But I would read a chapter and I'd be like, oh, that's not so hard. Okay, I can see how that works. And then I'd do whatever. I mean, when you're on a 3-hour flight, there's lots of whatevers to do, listen to some music, play a game on your phone or something. Then I'd go back and do another chapter. And by the time I landed, I had done 6 of the 8 chapters, but I was like, I know just enough right now to where if they put me into a situation, I should be able to handle it. What this is all about is the same thing that woman who was talking about being told she could never learn a foreign language and then discovering she could. She just had to learn it under her own terms. It's a limiting belief. She believed she couldn't learn the language until she was faced with a situation to where her desire overcame the belief that she didn't know or couldn't learn. And likewise for me, thinking that I'm too old and too washed up to be able to learn another computer programming language, and then it wasn't so much my desire. I guess you could say it was my desire, my urgent need to learn a new computer programming language overcame my belief that I couldn't. And to my surprise, I demonstrated to myself that I could. Within a couple of months, I had to learn 3 different software packages that each had their own working languages, 4GL, SQL, and then there was another one called Whitehill. And uh, and I was doing what needed to be done. A year into my job, I had to learn how to interface with a government program, and because the law firms that we were supporting had to meet certain guidelines, and all this stuff was online at a government website, so I had to figure out how to download all that information and all the rest of that. So I figured it out because I had to. One of the things that has been coming up around me recently by people, regardless of age, it's they run into a roadblock. What they're doing can't continue anymore. And so now they need to start over. Uh, it could be that they've been actually, I had this conversation earlier today with somebody who has been working in an industry. That industry has dried up. So now she needs to take all of the skills that she had and apply them to a different industry, a related industry, but she can't just start from the point of I have this powerful reputation and all I have to do is answer the phone when it rings. She actually has to go out and make the calls like she did when she was starting in the first place, in the first industry. And this overwhelming dread of I have to start all over again. I have to start from scratch. The thing is, she's not starting from scratch. She's already done this. She's already demonstrated she knows how to do this, and she's already experienced the learning curve. Nobody wants to have to redo the initial steps to, build your new reputation in a new environment and all the rest of that. But she's going to do it a lot more quickly and a lot more easily because she's already learned the lessons from the first time. So it's not starting from scratch. She had to bake a cake from scratch. The cake is gone. It's time to make a new cake. But she's not making it from scratch. She already has all of the raw material necessary to start the next cake. So, yeah, she's not starting from the end point, but she's also not starting from scratch. This is a theme I am running into over and over again these days, which is why I bring this up. And it's particularly important in this age of AI. I do intend to have a conversation with you sometime soon about my thoughts about AI. I work in AI, or I work for a company that is building tools that use AI as tools. What's happening right now that is different from any previous time in our lifetime is that information is so easy to get. It is super easy to get. It's available online. It's available from your AI chatbots, and you can even if you aren't sure that your AI is telling you the right information, you can ask your AI how to ask the question so that you know the AI is giving you valid answers. It's really wild. This is a completely new frontier for us in terms of how we learn how to do things. And a lot of people are concerned, we're going to run out of jobs. What am I going to do with a computer science degree? One of my sons is getting a computer science degree from college, even as we speak right now. The jobs he is learning how to do, the jobs he is learning how to do is These jobs already are drying up. So, what is it that's going to make the difference? The difference is going to be experience. And that is something that no amount of information is going to overcome. Experience is what tells you how and when to deploy the knowledge that you have or that you need to acquire. And I realize it's very easy to hear what I just said and think to yourself, but wait a minute. If the computers already have the information we need, the computers will figure out over time how and when to employ that information. To which I respond, no, they won't. And here's why. You can read all the books you want to your infant about how to walk, but your infant is not going to learn how to walk by you telling them how to walk. The only way your infant learns how to walk is by trying. The same thing for learning how to swim. You don't learn how to swim by reading a book. You don't learn how to swim by asking about it online. You don't learn how to swim by asking your AI the best ways to learn how to swim. You still have to learn how to swim by going into the pool and doing the things. And another example, not that I need to pile on because you already know where I'm going with this. If you want to learn how to ride a bicycle, you're not going to learn by reading it in a book and then just saying, oh, there's a bicycle. I can ride a bicycle. I realize that this isn't how we think about work today. We think about work, we're in an information age, and work is all about accumulating information, processing the information, and sending the information out. No, it isn't. It is true that a lot of work in the future is ultimately gonna come down to plumbers and, which doesn't sound very sexy, or car mechanics, or the people who build the robots that do the robot things, the people who are building the drones that go out and do the drone things, and it could be that AI is gonna get better and better at designing those things and taking over some of the knowledge work that we used to do, but it is not going to take over all of it. And it is still going to require a component that can learn from experience by doing. There are some things that have to be done. Now, I also contend that knowledge itself is, we haven't reached the end point just because just because now we can build computers that can design the next level of computers. We've been here before, and the analogy isn't 100% the same, but it is very similar when we moved from counting with our fingers to using a device called an abacus. Philosophers back in the day of Socrates, and believe me, you can look this up. Socrates once said that learning how to write is going to stunt your mental development because you're not going to actually do the learning yourself. You're going to be reading the learning from somebody else. It's an interesting idea. And yet we know here in the future that because we learned how to read and we learned how to write, that we are able to take all of the knowledge that was amassed before us, learn how to master it, and then start developing the next round of knowledge. We are very resilient as human beings. As long as we're careful about how we handle certain technologies that we have created, and so far we've survived the nuclear age. As long as we can survive, not creating our robot overlords that manage to enslave us, uh, we've still have very far to go. We have a lot of capacity left up here. So, all that by way of saying, we are not at the end of the road, but we do need to know how to think. Thinking is very important. It sounds like I'm stating an axiom, and yet, how many times do you go through the day and realize the people around you don't seem to be thinking very hard? How many times do you go about your business and realize you're just doing stuff on autopilot? Autopilot is cool. That means you've already trained your brain how to handle problems that used to be difficult to solve. You've already solved them. But what that means is you have capacity now to start working on the next problem. So I wanted to talk about that. And then I want to talk about one last thing, and that is something I've already alluded to when I was talking about the using the cake example of you bake a cake, and then it's time to bake another cake, and you've learned from that experience. No experience that you decide you're going to learn from is ever wasted. And this was one of the hardest lessons for me to learn when I started my writing career. Now, I've written several short stories and sold them to professional markets. I've written a novel, haven't sold that one yet, but I haven't given up either. Um, and the thing about writing is you write a story, you shop it around to all of the editors who are looking for that kind of genre of story. And if nobody buys it, then you get frustrated and sad. And then you say, why did I even bother writing this? Nobody wants it. It's very common for any artist of any kind to have to deal with so much serial rejection that they begin to get very down on the whole enterprise. But the thing is, you shouldn't. You shouldn't get down on yourself because writing that short story that you did not sell yet was practice. You wrote it, you had the experience of writing it, and now when you write the next one, you are going to do some things a little more easily because you've already had the practice of doing them. And if you use what's called intentional practice, where you say, okay, I'm going to write another story, but I'm going to focus on this one thing. I remember one time saying, I'm going to focus on making sure I get one of the five senses in every paragraph so that you will not go more than five paragraphs without shorter paragraphs, without being hit with the sense of smell, the sense of sight, the sense of touch, what they're hearing. And taste maybe doesn't come in all the time, but but taste does come in when somebody is feeling fear, and that sort of coppery taste you get in the back of your mouth, that kind of thing. So I made that was an exercise for one of the stories I wrote. I wrote another story, I'm gonna focus on writing in third person. I wrote another story, I'm gonna focus on writing in first person, that kind of thing. If you are writing a story with intentional practice, even if that story does not sell, you did not waste your time writing that story. Yo-Yo Ma spends 4 hours a day playing cello when there's nobody around. Nobody hears it. He does not record it. Nobody hears it at all in the future or when it's happening. But you hear the results of that practice when he spends an hour and a half on the stage. So it's very easy for us to get frustrated. Right now, I am working for a company that is building software to help people achieve their goals. And the software works, and the software is being improved on a daily basis, every day. My business partner John is like, "Oh, it's demo time. Let me show you this new feature I've added, or let me show you this change in the UI." And he's very excited, and it's awesome. And this software is awesome. I really do believe that this is very good software. I should probably put a link in the description in case you're interested. It's Goalminder, Goal, Minder without that E at the end, MINDR.com. Anyway, you go to Goalminder, and then you go through all of the scientifically proven methods that you would go to improve the likelihood that you're going to complete your goals. What if this software doesn't take off? What if we do not end up making enough money to pay for the office space, pay for the servers, and all the rest of that? We'll have to move on to another project. And that idea is daunting, and every once in a while, John and I will talk about that as a real possibility because, you reach a point where the money is the money gonna run out before we get customers, or are we gonna get customers and then money is never gonna be another issue, again? Don't know yet. We're still gonna find out, but the, it's it's not wasted. While we have been building this software, something else came up, and then John realized, "Oh, we need a tool to do this other thing that is tangentially related," and he was able to whip up this software in just a couple of hours. If this need had come up a couple of months prior, he wouldn't have been able to do that because of all of the techniques that he has mastered to get us where we are. In fact, when we started, we were not using AI to help with coding. And by the way, there's a long diatribe about using AI to help with coding. This is not the place, or the time at least, to talk about that. But he discovered, because he decided to try it and discovered that it doesn't work for our purposes. But rather than say, "Well, I tried it, didn't work. Enough of We don't need to worry about AI for that." We were using AI as a tool from within our app to help people with specific tasks as you go. But using AI to actually write the code, that wasn't as effective. Except he kept trying. And then he would try it a different way, and he would try it a different way, and then he finally found, here's where the AI really speeds up the process. And he was able to uh, uh, make the AI work for us in such a fantastic capacity that his development time just it compressed hours worth of work into minutes. None of the work that he has done to build this software is wasted, even if this software specifically doesn't end up panning out. Just like Yo-Yo Ma, just like those short stories written by authors who weren't able to sell those short stories. Stephen King has a trunk full of short stories he was never able to sell. He's got novels he has never sold. He does not look at them as a waste. In fact, he will write a first draft and then throw it away and write a second draft. When you buy a book written by Stephen King, you're buying the second version of the book. No effort is wasted as long as you look at it as practice. So those were the stories I wanted to tell today because it seems to be an issue that I am encountering everywhere in my life. I'm encountering it at that particular job. I'm encountering it with other friends of mine who have YouTube channels or consulting businesses. It seems to be something that is on our minds these days. And so I wanted to share some thoughts on that. And maybe you think I'm missing something, not describing something. Feel free to leave comments in the comment section, and when you do, please remember to be kind during the discussion. But I will certainly engage, and I hope others will engage in the conversation as well. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen. And if you have any suggestions or questions, please do feel free to put them in the comments section. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take care.